Today we are with Dharmesh Raithatha, the product partner at Forward Partners. Welcome.
Thank you.
How are you doing today?
Yeah, great. It's nice to be here.
Great. So I'm really excited that we are having this conversation today because we have so many people who run their companies or want to start their own companies who are watching us, and they have so many questions, and I myself have lots of questions. So I hope today we can have a productive conversation and find some answers. So my first question to you will be about Forward Partners. Mm-hmm. Not everyone knows what it is, what actually VC fund is and accelerator is and incubator is. Can you just quickly explain what do you do there, what does it look like?
Forward Partners is a venture capital fund which invests money into startups, and different types of venture capital focus at different stages. We're pretty unique in that we invest half of our capital into idea stage companies. That's literally founders that just have ideas. And then the other half of our capital is in seed stage companies which have just got going and they're looking for funding to start to grow. The bit that's quite different to us compared to some other VCs out there is we have the equivalent of a agency within our business, but we call it a venture development team. And so what we do is we invest in these very early stage companies, and then I run a team of designers, developers, product, growth, talent, basically everything that a founder would need to actually get them to grow very, very fast. That's really, very different.
That's very unique, because I think we had this conversation recently with one of my friends who is starting a company, and she wanted to get some advice, and there are so many programs, accelerators and incubators out there that literally do nothing. They're like a co-working space, and you get a desk and you're supposed to figure out yourself how to grow a company. Or there are people who are actually giving you advice that never had a company before, so you're kind of very confused what is their advice based on. So you said a very interesting thing about your job. We give a shit, we're honest, we share what we know, and have the time to help founders execute on their vision.
Yeah.
What did you mean by that?
Obviously, we give a shit that we really care, and I think most VCs would say that they care. But I think the big difference for us is like we pick a very few set of companies to work on every year, and the team isn't just advice. So it might be that advice is like, hey, I'll meet you once a month, we'll have a chat for a couple of hours, off you go and execute. Because we're investing in very early stage founders that don't have this team around them, we're saying, hey, look, here's what you should do, and hey, I'll do it. Yeah. Because you don't have the time until the point that you can get your own person on board, and that's the difference. So we are practitioners as well, so we give advice, but we also are able to do stuff, and that's a big difference.
But I'm curious, how do you pick these people that don't even have a product or anything yet? All they have is an idea.
We get about 4,000 applications every year that we look at for both seed and pre-seed, but it's roughly 50-50 split. And on the pre-seed side, we look at the founder and how credible they are, and how do they come across, and how passionate are they about the problem that they're trying to solve. How clearly can they articulate the problem? It's not just someone who goes, I want to do a startup and I'm going to do it something about, I don't know, dog care. And they haven't done any more thinking than that. That's too vague for us. It's someone who's going, I've done a bit of thinking about this. I've got in my mind a sense of what this could be, which enables us to evaluate it properly. Like, does that make sense from a kind of theoretical point of view? And also that means if we do invest, that we can get going very quickly to actually build out a product solution to test that sort of hypothesis. And then the third piece is the market big enough to support a venture scale type of business?
Let's talk about the first metric that you mentioned, the credibility of the founder. What do you mean by that? Because there is another misconception among the investors that if person, for example, worked at Google or any kind of big brand and then have the knowledge of technology or whatever they were doing, while in big companies actually it might be the opposite, that you could be like a really a tiny person responsible for a very, very small part. So what do you look at when you think about credibility?
I think it's the hardest one of all, like to be able to see if a founder has got what it takes to be successful. So I think there's one in when you meet someone and you get a sense of like their energy, their passion, their ability to articulate the problem, and the ability to be clear in their thinking. And so those are things that will stand them well as it grows. Domain expertise is, if they understand that domain well, then you can understand, okay, if we can supply product and technology and these other pieces, but we don't have the domain expertise, so can they be that person? So that's another one. But we've backed founders that don't necessarily have the domain expertise. In those cases, we're looking at what have they done to actually build up some domain expertise. And so if they've been doing that and hustling, then that's also another sign. Obviously, if someone has been successful already in their current job, that gives you some confidence that they know how to manage a team, they know how to operate, etc. But we've also invested in people that are more like your, entrepreneurs, like, look, I've just got this belief and this vision and I'm going to drive it forwards. It is that one which I can't give you a checklist to go tick, 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 tick. It's all these things. One of the things you're thinking about is if they were going to go up and present to another VC, could they articulate their vision well? The bit that you don't know is how good an operator they're going to be. And so that is the piece which, as part of our process, we are evaluating once we invest of like, well, how does that play out? And that is the piece where you have to take some risk. And you have evidence. If they're like, look, I've already worked in a big organisation and I've gone from here and I've grown to here, you're like, okay, that's probably less. And then for the other ones who are like, they are maybe self-employed, run their own couple of little businesses, and then they found this idea, you don't have that indication, and there you're taking a risk, and you have to then manage that and understand, okay, let's be aware that what might happen.
And then the second part that you mentioned there, what you're looking at is how a person thought this idea through. So for example, if someone comes up to you and says, we have this idea for, there's always an app that helps people to do these, and these are the 3 functions they will have. Is it enough for you of thinking? What are you looking at?
I'll give you a couple of examples. So one of the companies we backed very early on was Appear Here. They're like a marketplace for pop-up shops. Ross, 19, never done a startup before, super articulate. He basically had run his own little pop-up store. So he understood it from, like the difficulties of trying to find a space. That gives you the sense of like, do they understand that domain? Yes, they do. He was really strong in articulating that there is a problem here. And immediately if I tell you it's like Airbnb but for short-term retail, you kind of get it.
Yeah.
The fact that he could pin it down to that and articulate, look, I've already done a pop-up store, I understand what it's like for these people to actually try to find spaces, and then you think, what's the market size of retail in general, of commercial space, and it's huge. That is a good basis to proceed. And another one is Patch. They sell plants to millennials basically, and Freddie was a branding consultant, so he has no domain expertise in plants. Again, he was trying to decorate his flat, and he just realised that, like, I don't have a car, how am I going to get to a garden centre? They're very far away. And all the brands out there were basically talking to the kind of Gardener's World audience, much older. And he's going, what about all these young people that are never going to have nature, and how can I bring that? And so he'd done some work in terms of, so he didn't actually talk about functions at all. He wasn't talking about, this is my product XYZ. He's like, here's the problem, is that garden centres are moving out of London. Lots of people have flats in central London, they don't have cars, and they want some nature and they don't know what to buy, and that's a broken experience. So that is what.
And what was his solution?
Actually, the solution started off as more of a bespoke service of you tell us about your space, tell us about the light conditions, and we will recommend plant for you to buy, but we'll also deliver them to your house. So it was, it wasn't creating a new e-commerce experience based on the things that we might get used to with Amazon, and bring them to this audience, but with a very clear brand talking to millennials. So that was his solution, We started off with a very personalised recommendation system, and over time we changed it into more straight up e-commerce. He came to us with a sense of, it's going to be e-commerce, I'm going to sell plants, but here's the problem, here's the trends, and I need your help to help me figure out what is the product going to be.
You mentioned something just a bit earlier about Airbnb for retail. Don't you get annoyed when people do that? It's an Uber for this, it's Airbnb for that, and it hides everything else that you need to think about.
If you can distill something down so that I can say it in a very, very short sentence to anchor you to like, this is what I'm doing, then the likelihood for you to succeed is much higher, because you're always pitching your company to everyone, to employees, to new investors, to people you meet in the street. Your customers are going to take it to someone else, and if they can all distill it and say, actually, you know what, it's a bit like for this, then that's actually a good thing. Obviously, if it's just a buzzword bingo and taking things, that doesn't make sense. But generally, most ideas are a bit of something else, either target to a new market or there's a bit of new technology, but they're not reinventing everything from scratch. That doesn't normally happen.
And then in terms of the market size, you mentioned the US as the market size. But again, I always get confused with that, because it depends on what you look at the market, especially now when kind of industries emerging, when Amazon can become a bank anytime, so you assess, you don't even know which market you're looking at. So how do you define the market?
That's where like the investors are sort of looking at the deal. So for example, with Patch, you're thinking, okay, how many plants are sold at all in the UK, and then within that, like how many are sold to millennials. So you can do it from the top down, like what's the global sort of plant market, plants sold, and that'll give you one idea. And then you can say, well, if you're targeting just millennials, then how many millennials are there? How many like properties are there in London? Let's try to do it from top down and bottom up. And then looking at that, you go, okay, this is the size of the market, but hold up, we don't have to stop at just London. We could go into the country. We could go into other cities and go global. So there's another sense of the market growing.
And talking about the need as well, because Patch, if they were pitching it to me and said there is plant market, these are how many plants are sold, these are how many millennials in the UK, and I would be, well, yes, but do these millennials want to buy plants, or they're not buying plants, not because the centers are far away, just because they don't really need plants and they don't care about plants. Maybe you and your friends, 10 of you, are very unique and you talk to them, but the rest of the population, then you can never assess the rest of your population until you actually go and do it. So how do you assess the need?
Yeah, so that is generally something like that is we do post-investment. So you have to have a feeling, like a gut feeling of, look, the idea that millennials don't want to buy plants at all, that doesn't make any sense to me. Does everyone like to have plants around? You kind of get a sense that, okay, but yeah, I don't know how much of a need that is. And that is the bet that you're making, right? That there is enough people that are willing to do this. And generally for pre-seed investments, we do that post-investment where we'll immediately go out and do lots of customer research and see if we can find people to talk to that are actually experiencing that problem. It might not be a lot of people, so generally recommend, like, can we find 30 people that have been trying to buy plants that kind of fit our profile? Already that gives you a clue. If that's relatively easy to find, that gives you a sort of suggestion that, look, there's something here. You're never going to find out that there are millions of people until you actually go and build it and grow it and see how far it can get. But for us, actually, 30 people who clearly are saying, look, I'm trying to do this, it's really difficult, and that's what we did. So post-investment with Patch, we basically said, right, let's go and interview 30 people, let's actually all go and buy plants ourselves and experience it. We went to Columbia Road Flower Market, lots of people there. You're buying plants based on aesthetics, and this was the recurring feedback from everyone. It's like, I bought these plants based on what I think looks nice, because I have no clue what plant actually lives in my space. I take it home, I don't know how to look after it, it died within 3 weeks, I never want to buy a plant again. Yeah, and I never want to buy a plant again. And and I didn't have a car, so I was limited to one or two, and I had to get an Uber or put it on the train. And you're like, okay, so if we could basically deliver the plants, source the plants, help actually these people decide what plants, not just based on aesthetics, but first on, tell us a bit about your space, then we're solving a lot of these problems. That's what came out of just 30 interviews of, like, okay, I can see a need here.
Interesting. And do you invest only in tech startups? Because my personal sadness is about the fact that, for example, the company that I run has very minimal technical part. It's very human, it's very physical, it's very traditional in that sense. And if you look for an accelerator, an incubator or investor or anything that actually looks at normal businesses or traditional, but there are none, because everyone wants something that scales fast, everything like they can be tested fast. So what happens to the rest of the businesses? What will happen to everyone who doesn't have a tech part?
Yeah, I mean, I guess from our side, if we're prepared to put in, maybe £6 million ultimately over time into a startup, and we're trying to get a return of £60 million from each investment, that's kind of how we think about it. It's like, this is the size of our fund. We know that if a company's, going to really succeed, that's what we would like to see as the return. If it really does, so do we believe that could happen in this 10%? They get 10% of the market share, and can they do that in a growth, very high growth way and be very capital efficient? Then it generally leads you to technology is part of that. Obviously, we work as a different strategy, and they've also managed to grow in that kind of way. And so there are some businesses that will do that. The size of our fund dictates that, technology is important, because it then gives you those characteristics that allow you to understand how it could grow very, very fast.
Do you think because of that you might sometimes make a misjudgment on what solution is? Because if you always, to any problem that someone comes to you and the idea, you always think of tech solution, that kind of might miss on the entire sector of actual human solutions?
Well, actually, case in point, one of the companies we've backed is Koru Kids. They're basically reinventing childcare. They have a massive human part to their business, which is the childcare people. So it's a marketplace, people that need childcare, but their whole solution is to find and train students and people that want to be childcare assistants, and train them up in order to actually provide the supply, because there isn't enough supply. And so there's a huge human part to that. And increasingly we're finding that, especially for things like marketplaces, you have to do something quite innovative on one side or the other. It's not just building a bit of technology and then hoovering people on either side.
What kind of qualities are a no-no for a founder? What's something that scare you when you have an interview and you definitely look at this person and say, no, that won't work?
Obviously, the things that I mentioned already, like if there's not clarity in thought of where they are, that's an immediate no for us, because then we're like, well, we can't just back you based on you've just come here on a whim saying I want to do a startup, and you haven't done the thinking in order to articulate it well. Because that journey to go from I want to do a startup to clarity of thought of this is what it's going to be can take between 3 months to 2 years or more. So we have to invest when it feels like it's at that end, versus investing someone and going, actually I don't really know what I'm meant to be doing. So that's one. For us, that's important, the clarity of thought that they can provide on the problem. You see people that have maybe the steps that they've taken to get there don't make sense. They've been doing things, and you can see they've been scrabbling around and trying to build things, and they've gone the wrong direction. And then they're coming to you after they've been doing their startup for 2 years, and it's just been sort of pootling along. And those ones generally we find is harder for us to invest in, because there's so much emotional energy been put into it already, and it hasn't really worked. Then it's well, why would we invest now? Actually, for pre-seed, we much prefer to catch people at that journey before they've started to build lots of stuff, because at that point it's very hard for us to help to set the right direction. Better than to say, hey, you know what, go away and come back when you're ready for seed investment. So that's another.
And what's the clear differentiation between pre-seed and seed? Because I feel like the terminology is so different for every investment fund, and also pre-seed it's kind of a new term, it didn't even exist. So how do you define pre-seed and seed?
Yeah, so for us, pre-seed is generally 1 or 2 founders, and quite a lot of our pre-seed companies are just one founder, which is quite rare for venture capital to invest in that, where they've got a clear idea. Maybe they've built like some prototype, and we don't need it, but maybe they have, but they haven't built a lot of product. They haven't been running live. They're literally like, look, I've got an idea. Might have a homepage. I might have a few things that I've done, and for us that is pre-seed. It's like they haven't even got a team around them. Pre-product, pre-traction, pre-team basically. Seed is I've got a product. I've got a beginnings of a team, and I've got some revenue or growth coming in, and what I need money now is to continue that, and I'm 18 months away from a Series A type of investment.
Let's talk about MVPs, because I think again it's a term that everyone uses, but there is a lot of confusion about what MVP is. What do you define as MVP, and how do you test things that are not MVPable?
So when we invest in a pre-seed company, generally we have like a few stages. So the first stage is let's go and do some research, let's go and talk to people to understand the existing problem. At that point, if we can see it is true, there is a problem here, we really understand all the nuances, then that for us is like a first tick, like there is a problem here to be solved. The next stage is where we kind of go, okay, well, how do we get some proof on the product solution and that anyone will actually value it in some way? So for me, an MVP, and I know there's lots of different ways to define that, is actually like building enough product that you can get someone to either pay for it or use it in a meaningful way, and that for me is what an MVP is.
And when you say someone, 1 person, 5 people?
So I mean, there's a bit, depending on business to business, it depends. So for example, with Patch, we built a homepage and a form, asked people to like tell us about their space. They come to the website, they can tell us about their space, what kind of plants they're looking for, and then that would just send an email to the founder saying like this is what the person sent, and then he would basically send them back some pictures of plants that he recommended and say, if you like them, just send me an email and I'll deliver them to your house. The actual experience for the person ordering was like, I go to this place and what I get at the end is plants. So I've experienced the whole value proposition. It's all clunky and there's lots of messiness within it, but I get to see the whole value proposition. And what we said is, look, over a space of like 4 or 5 weeks, can we get like 20, 30 customers to do that? And then for us, that was like, if we can see that, let's move on to build that proper product.
And where were you looking for these customers? You were like running an ad and seeing who will land on a page? How were you testing?
So it was a mix. So we like to run some paid marketing. Also helps us understand like how easy it would be to acquire people using those channels and understand how expensive it might be. But that we also did flyering, because that was an easy one for Patch. It was like, actually, because the delivery zone was, we didn't have many. We actually hired a van. It was like, actually, let's do it in the local area, so we can actually target blocks of flats that have got terraces, which make sense. So it's whatever channel that makes sense to test. But normally we like to go do some hustle type activity, but also let's test a bit of paid marketing, because we know that those, when they work, can be very scalable channels.
And with MVPs, what metrics are you looking at to see if that was a successful MVP or not? So traction is one, and how many people are interested in this product? What are others? Most
of the time, the businesses that we back, there's some revenue involved. So we like to see that, look, someone has been willing to pay. And for the few where it's usage, like we want to see that there is a small set of people that are really valuing this service, as clunky as it may be.
What is the value of user experience in designing that then? Because sometimes people use certain products just because of how nice the experience and the service around it is, and I think the service design industry is growing right now because of that, because people don't choose products anymore by the price or what they can offer, but the whole experience of it, and MVP can never give that experience. So how do you look at that? Even
if I've built a clunky experience, people are willing to spend the effort to get whatever I'm offering at the end, because it either solves a problem or they need that thing. then that's a good indicator for us, right? That's better than I've spent a lot of time building this beautiful thing and I know that some people are going to consume it because it's a nice experience. You know, that gives me confidence to go, if I give you more money and you make this even better, it's going to go up. So actually, from our point of view, actually, the fact that it isn't great is a positive.
But that's if you got a positive response. What if you didn't get a positive response, so no one is applying, and then you try to guess, was it the wrong product? Was it not, the experience wasn't good enough? Did we run a bad ad with bad branding and design wasn't bad?
Generally what I found is in the first set of interviews that you do before you build any product, if you can find people relatively easily, you ask them about their past experiences and they talk about them and you look at it and go, wow, they're really trying to solve this problem and they're going through all these hoops to do it, and you find that that's the case, then so far in 5 years of doing this, I've never seen it go on to actually the next bit not working out. So actually it's in the research piece that you can already get strong clues, A, what product you need to build, and B, that whether it's going to work or not. So far it's never really happened that we've had positive feedback on the research and then we've built a product that no one wanted. The research gives you all the insight to go, actually this is what the product should be.
What about more complex companies and solutions? So either B2B or something that requires the whole idea is the tech, and to build the tech it requires time. What do you work with those type of startups?
Yeah, some. They're definitely harder at pre-seed, that you need to build a lot of tech. Generally, we like to invest in companies if they have that tech already available to them, or we can do something called a Wizard of Oz type test, which is, we'll fake it. We can use humans as the proxy for AI in order to prove that actually, from the customer point of view, they don't know if it's an AI bot or not. And then that proves that the value, that we can deliver the value, and then our belief has to be that over time we can basically build the technology to backfill the human.
And what about the B2B businesses that, again, it's very difficult to get a big enterprise to ask and use some product that is new and unfamiliar and risky?
Yeah.
Do you work with those type of?
So a few. There's one coming soon, and what we said to the pre-seed founder, our preference is that you already have one relationship where they've said, I'm interested in the problem that you're solving and I'm willing to give feedback on what you're offering.
How do you find those people? Is it friends of friends that will agree to that?
In some ways, that is the responsibility of the if the founder comes to us and goes, I want to build this enterprise business and I've got no contacts in the industry, it already makes it hard. So, that would be one of our criteria, whether we would invest or not in something like that.
You ran some companies yourself before joining Forward Partners, and you sold one of the companies that you ran. Can you tell a bit more about the experience of, first of all, running two companies, only one of which was sold, and also about the whole experience of selling?
I know that sounds like selling was I've become this gazillionaire, but that wasn't the story.
Can you tell how much you sold it for?
No.
Okay. Not enough to buy a house?
No, it's enough to pay back my investors and make a little bit of money. And actually the story is relevant to why I thought Forward Partners needed to exist. That company I was living in Italy by the beach and thinking, how can I stay here forever? And I was buying buying a coffee, and I got this coffee shop loyalty card, and I was going, this is crazy, I always lose these things. And surely you can do a digital version. In fact, if you put the card over an iPhone, they're exactly the same size. I was like, I can digitize this makes sense. I was a solo founder doing this by myself. I have some sort of tech and product skills at that time, so I felt I can do something. I knew nothing about investment and how to raise money, so I got my friend to put in £25,000. He basically negotiated taking 50% of the company to do not very much, which meant that I'd already basically made it very difficult for this business to succeed at that point. I then, because it wasn't that much money, I had to keep a job going while I was doing it. So I was doing it in the evenings and weekends, which is already making it harder as well. I didn't have my own CTO. I basically had a developer in Denmark doing the iPhone build. I had a team in Argentina doing the Android and the back-end build. and I was managing it all in the evenings while I was going to work and you know, trying to earn some money to keep it going. In spite of all of that, like, we launched the product, it went live. I had customers in London, in San Francisco, in New Zealand, and because it was coffee shops, it was interesting. You basically needed sales teams to go in and sell into individual coffee shops, and I was like, oh, I didn't envisage wanting to build a big sales operation. That wasn't my idea for this. It was meant to be like, how can I do something that lets me live in Italy, not having to go and manage lots of sales teams. But anyway, it was moving fast, and but you know, the bits that I struggled with was, so me and the initial investor, who was one of my best friends, we don't speak anymore. Because we argued so much, and you know, one of the regrets of my life, the fact that I was using contractors for my tech meant that no one was challenging me with any of my thinking. No one was saying, hey, we could do this, we could do this. They were just like, you tell me what you want to build and I'll build it. And they were great at doing that, but there was no challenge. I went down like a technology solution, a product solution, that after some point I realized there's a better way to do this, but I'm basically run out of money to make that switch. And I think if I'd had a technology person sitting next to me, we would have been riffing about this and thinking about this in a different way. And so, you know, in spite of all those things, it was growing, and it got to the point where it started to really take off in New Zealand, and they said, actually, we'd like to buy this off you. And the job that I was doing in the daytime was working at Mind Candy, and I was a very early employee, and my dream was to work on a digital pet product, and it was taking off, and I just had a baby. And so I was like, oh, hold up, so I'm really enjoying this. This startup actually is like very sales heavy that I didn't expect. They want to buy it off me. Let's do a deal. And so that's what happened. If Forward Partners existed, it would have been perfect for me. I could have joined Forward Partners. I would have had the tech team, the product support. I would have been challenged. All of that thinking would have, you know, helped me to actually take that to a very different shape of a business.
What happened to the business after that?
I think it went on for a couple of years, and then it just trickled away.
Do you have like any sort of personal feelings about that?
So the only personal feeling I have, there was a point where I think I should have believed it enough to just quit all the jobs and go for it full time.
And you think you would have succeeded if you did that?
I don't know. No idea. But I think that, you know, there was that point, and there was a point where I went, oh, hold up, now I've got a kid and I've got this other thing, and do I believe enough? And I think what ended up happening is I wanted that problem to be solved, so I started solving it. Then I realised that there's a whole big business here that I don't know if I want to be the one doing that.
You actually touched on a very interesting subject of the perseverance and kind of, shall I go on, or this idea is not working. Do you have any advice on that? Because sometimes, like the situation you just described, when it's kind of doing something, but you need much more, and as we've heard from this story, it didn't work out, and you can't really tell if it would have worked out if you put more time in it. Was it the wrong product and the wrong solution, or was it just you didn't put enough time in it?
Yeah, I think knowing what I know now, I had definitely found a problem to be solved, and no one had yet solved it. If I'd understood better how to raise capital and how to raise money, then perseverance would have got us to a much better outcome. Because we already had customers, and it was like, you know, one man shop building this thing, and people were coming from all over the world going, actually, this is really interesting. So, you know, there's enough of a clue of like, you're onto something.
So when do you give up on the idea?
So when do you give up? Yeah, that's a good question. When you've built something and there's a very small amount of people responding to your product. That's one. So we've seen a few companies where, I mean, you'll always get some customers using your product, but there's if you find, for example, that you can't make the economics of it work, and you can't raise enough money to continue to find a way through it. So, you know, there's a lot of businesses where you'll get some customers, but when you look at the maths, you're like, it's costing me this much to acquire this customer. Let's say it costs you like, you know, £400, and I'm making like £5 from each customer. I don't see how over time I can optimize it to make that make sense. And so things like that make a difference, right? Like, so low margin businesses, harder to make work. Some of them do, but, you know, much harder. And you do that, and you have to have some sense of, look, I can navigate from where I am now to there.
But as a founder, you are always very optimistic. You have to be optimistic as a founder and hardworking and just believing in your idea. And there is always this concept of pivoting, that if something is not working, you're doing the right thing, but you might just need to tweak a little bit or go in opposite direction. So do not give up your idea and your company. Just maybe you need this and that. And sometimes that's what, it's not just doing the one thing and realizing it's not working. It's going one direction and another direction.
Yeah.
So where do you give up the pivoting part?
So I think that if you believe that the market is big and the problem is the right problem to solve, but you've just ended up building the wrong product solution, and you can fund yourself or get funding to continue, obviously, because that was my personal decision, was like, I can't see how to do that. But if you can, then you should keep going, because it's just that you have to change the product solution. And whereas if you start to believe that this market is not big enough, I can't see how to change this, then that's a different story.
And the emotional part of it, I think that's, for me, always was the hardest part. And I think this is what is not talked about enough. I think a bit more now. But being a founder or running a company, part of it is understanding the market and having the skill and having investment, whatever there is in resources. But part of it is just being tough enough to stomach it all, which you can't really learn anywhere. I don't know, do you give any sort of support at Forward Partners for founders who are going through?
Yeah, so we've started to make it part of our agenda for this year, of like helping founders navigate the stresses of it. So for us, you've got a solo founder who is alone with their idea, and then suddenly they've got a lot of people around them. Like already that's a big relief. Like, and they've got people that have done this multiple times, and so suddenly it's like, hey, yeah, do this. Here's a step. Try this. Do this. We've seen this before, or here's some strategies to think about. So already there's some relief around that. It's always stressful, right? Like that is their dream that they want to make happen. For whatever reason they want to do it, right? But they've probably left a good paying job to go and do this thing, and they need to make it work. And so there are ups and downs in that. I feel like while they're with us, it's a little bit more cushions, because they have a support network around them to balance things like exercise and meditation, and there's lots of conversations in founder communities now of these kinds of things and understanding. Startups just are inherently stressful endeavors. Both the startups that I did were extremely stressful, and they also take tolls on your partners, and it's not just you, it's the effect it has on everyone else. So they're not easy. Any
tips or advice if someone is going through a really hard time and kind of is about to give up just because of the emotional and stress side of it? What should they do, like tonight, if they came home and they like literally...
Exercise, I think, is massively important. I always say to founders, like, if you can, like, have one day in a week where you're trying not to work on the business, and just let your brain, because you're still... That way your brain can think about it, but in a different place in your brain. Like, let the water logic like slosh around. And also just to give you that bit of rest, because it's like a 10-year journey. So you have to be able to pace it a little bit and try to build a bit of a support network of other founders to help you as well.
What about the general working hours for startups? Because I think there are kind of two theories, I suppose. One is that you need to work 24 hours as hard as you can, and that's the only way you can make it, because everyone will be faster than you, the market changes, so to make something you actually need to work 24 hours, 7 days a week. And another kind of way of doing it, some people are saying that no, this is definitely not the right way, because you'll burn out and you won't come up with good ideas if you work 24 hours. You actually need to work normal hours, have enough sleep, meditate, go for a run. What would you advise, seeing so many startups going through?
Different people also have to understand their own levels of where they are. Some people might need, I need to have 8 hours of sleep in order for me to be effective, because one bad decision might cost me a month, right? And there's other people that are going, look, I'm a high energy person who can survive on 6 hours sleep, and so I can work through that. So I don't know if there's one hard and fast rule about it. And especially with very early stage startups, if you have risked a lot to make it happen, there will be peaks of time where you have to put in the hours to make it work. Then there might be times as it progresses where you can start to go, hold up, okay, that isn't necessary anymore. So I think in the beginning it is stressful, and you do have to do more hours than, it's not a 9 to 5 job. You've got to put the hours in, but I think that you got to find the things that help you manage it in a time effective way. If that is, look, every day you go for a run, because that manages the cortisol levels, you should be doing that, right? Like, and don't live on 5 hours of sleep for like more than a week, because that is not going to help you. So but I think that's on an individual needs to understand for themselves.
What do you usually advise to people who have an idea but at the same time they don't have, maybe they have a family they have to support and all these things? Shall everyone quit their jobs and just go for it? Or is it okay to actually run something for a side project? And how long should you give it as a side project?
One of the benefits of like what we do is we get a lot of people who are going, I have a job, I've got a family, so I can't just go on zero income. And because we're willing to invest at that stage, we're like, look, that's fine. Like, you can take a salary from the investment we're giving you. So actually we get quite a few people coming to us, very capable, but they're like, look, I've just had twins or something, and this idea's got to happen, but I can't do it on zero money. We don't take many companies every year. And so for the other people, I think that it's perfectly fine to manage a bit of risk, right? And go, right, I'm going to build this as a side project for a period of time. I think that there's just a danger of, there is a moment where if you can start to see that, I've got some customers and I can see the product now, that you have to find some way to then take the jump. And it's normally before you feel comfortable.
I see. So you need to spot this right moment. And
yeah.
That would be your resignation.
Yeah.
My personal approach is not to take money from anyone. And I do understand the value of having investors and growing your business with a bit more backup, but it's just maybe my psychological thing. I can't take anyone else's money. And I also, my personal belief is that then you are more lean, you obviously don't overspend because you don't have money, everything comes out of your pocket, and you have to be profitable. So that kind of pushes you to being profitable as fast as you can because you don't really have other choice. And there is a big debate now that actually being backed up by a VC makes founders spend money on the wrong things and kind of start hiring people too early, whatever that is. So what's your opinion on that?
There's a certain set of ideas in this world where you're not going to get there if you don't take capital, right? So there's certain types of businesses that go, look, so a lot of marketplaces, for example, it's very hard to bootstrap those types of businesses and make them profitable from day one, like, because they require big network effects. It's only when you've got thousands of people on this side and that side of the platform that you can start to see money happening. And the money you make in the beginning is very small amounts, but it's meant to be very sticky. So how do you do that? By just running it as a small business. It doesn't make sense. You have to basically go, the only way for this thing to succeed, because it makes sense at scale, it doesn't make sense at non-scale. So I have to raise money, and that's what venture capitalists like to invest in, is like companies that they can understand that this is going to be big at scale and we're willing to take the risk of the capital to help you get there, versus other businesses which you can, there's lots of businesses like consultancy type businesses that can start off and they're making money immediately, and they go, actually we'll use this money to reinvest and to keep building it. They may also decide at some point, I want to now open 5 offices immediately because that is a good way and I'll take money to do that, or actually I would like to just do this slowly. I'm not worried about competition, for example. So yeah, we've got companies in our portfolio, they have got profitable very quickly, but it's like, well, yeah, it might take me the next year to slowly take the money and reinvest. In that next year, do I believe that other competitors might come into the space? And if you feel like, that's a possibility, then I better go and raise some money to sort of deflect that sort of coming across. Or do I see opportunity that means that I could do it slowly, but I want to do it fast. I want to make sure that I make the most of the opportunity that's in front of me. And so that's I guess the difference. So I don't think it's I'll take money or not. It's like, look at the thing that you're trying to do and understand that whether like it will only work, or there's a much better chance of it working if I take money.
And you at 4 Partners also support startups in terms of marketing and PR. Can you tell a bit more about that and maybe give advice to people who don't have support from 4 Partners? How should they approach marketing? Maybe what channels work the best, especially if we are talking about minimal budgets, as startups never have big budgets.
Mm-hmm. The way that we do it at 4 Partners is at the beginning we'll do a big brainstorm of all the potential channels that are out there, that are possible, that make sense, and then think about them from, there might be some, so I've got 0 customers and my first job is to get 2 customers. So I'm going to go and speak to my network and see if I can get 2 customers. That's a perfectly valid channel. It's free, but it takes up my time, and I can do that. So, but then I've got 2 customers who I can then speak to, learn about the experience and improve my product. And so in the beginning, you're trying to, 80% of your effort should be on these channels which you can hustle and do relatively cheaply, in order to start building some momentum into your business and starting to get more feedback from customers. While if you do have a bit of capital, then 20% should be thinking about how can I test some of these much bigger channels which are expensive and probably not profitable in the beginning. So Google AdWords are generally quite non-profitable in the beginning. It takes a lot of time to have a very optimized product offering that it all starts to work. And so 80-20 split, like most of your time, think about so Patch, for example, was doing flyering. Actually, it turned out that was very effective in the beginning. It was hard to scale, you needed lots of people, but flyering was very effective, and so they did that, and they did a bit of Facebook. Facebook was very inefficient, and over time that's just completely changed, and now they do lots of Facebook and they don't do any flyering, and they do catalogs. So they still took the learnings from it. It's like actually a physical thing in your post box is good. So my advice would be brainstorm all the channels that you can possibly think about. Doesn't matter how big they are or small they are. Pick off the smallest ones that are free, while also, in order to build momentum, because momentum is like a great thing and it helps you to learn, and start, but also test a little bit of the high scale channels as well.
Are there any particular channels, paid channels, at the moment that might require even a little bit more investment? So obviously they're riskier for founders. That would you actually recommend right now? Because technology changes all the time, and I think you mentioned Facebook. There is YouTube ads, Google AdWords, like so many things you can spend your money on, and you can't spend on everything. What would you recommend spending on?
So it's very hard to recommend without knowing a business. And I think the more you understand about your customers and how their behaviors are, the better you can predict which channel might make sense. So if you're doing holiday travel, right, like people search online for where to go on holiday, that would lead you to think that actually like the place I should start would be on Google advertising, because it's very intent driven behavior. Whereas if you're like, you made a new product which is some new funky mug, and it's like actually what I need to do is tell people about this product, and then that's more of a Facebook style display advertising. It wasn't something you were looking for, but I want to get it in front of you. And so it depends on the need. We've just invested in a startup that helps children to play the violin. There, for example, we've looked at YouTube, because there's lots of videos where people are going onto YouTube to learn how to play the violin, and so that's a great place to say, actually we've got an app that you could use to learn about it.
Any channels that are definitely a waste of time for anyone?
It's more about, for example, you want to do TV advertising, actually TV advertising can be actually per customer can be actually very, very cheap, but the minimum amount of money to put into it is like £50,000 to £100,000 just to try it out. So that will rule it out for most people just getting started. So TV advertising works for lots of companies. So TV
still works?
It does work, totally it works. But you can't do it until you get to a certain scale.
Does it even work for younger demographics? Because I don't think that many young people have TVs.
I mean, it depends on the audience, right? And TV, depending on the format, So some channels, and a lot of people are watching TV online, and so when I say TV, I mean like people watching programs and how you can target them.
What about traditional display advertising, banners? Are they still alive or they're dead? We're not talking about Facebook, but banners on the websites.
Oh, banners on websites?
Yeah.
I don't see that very much.
Okay.
But people use things like Outbrain, which are like content pieces and stuff like that. So they all fit into a particular type of company. But you should more think about it as like, I need to understand my customer, then I can decide what channels make sense, rather than the other way around of like, what's the best channel, I'm going to try it, because it may not match with your particular audience. So that is what good marketing and growth people do, is they have a good understanding of their customers.
And how long should you give a channel and how much money to see if that's working or not? Because again, you might have a good idea, like customers are definitely there, and then you try and actually it doesn't work. How long do you usually give a channel?
This is where a bit of experience comes in. So for example, a lot of our companies will do Google in the beginning, and they might so they've got a poor product, it's still new, the experience has not been polished, and they're advertising, and it might cost, because the conversion rate's so poor, it'll cost them £200 to convert a customer, and that customer makes them like £100. But I know if I can improve the conversion rate of this product, and I can optimize my campaigns over time, I know that the initial cost is going to come down. Now I know it's probably not going to come down to a tenth, but it might come down by 100%. So by 50%, so I can get it down to £100. And then do I believe that just through optimizing the campaigns, and do I believe I can optimize my product to get it to a conversion rate to go up, and so eventually I'll make more money. So that bit is an art, I think, to understand like how these things, you can optimize them over time, and how long that might take, and what is a reasonable thing and what is an unreasonable thing. And that's where somebody decides, what, this channel is going to work for us, it's going to work for us at scale once I've got this product polished, and I need to raise some money because I need to keep growing the business through that curve, and that's where you'll require capital basically.
And as a rule of thumb, would you say play around with one particular channel for a month until you change your strategy? What's the minimum, I suppose, you need to give a channel to see some sort of real result? Or is it a week?
If you take the beginning bit, which is that from initial tests, I can see that I'm in the right ballpark where I believe that over time I can optimize this, then you have to think about, can I have enough money to get me through it? So we've seen companies that take 3 or 4 years before it turns into profitable on a channel, and they're slowly, incrementally optimizing everything in order for it to work. So it could be that long. But within that, then they have to keep raising money until they get to that point, and that's what venture capital does.
How much money do you need to spend on advertising and attracting customers? Because there is always a temptation of like, let's put as much money as we can to attract customers because that's the core of our business, and then you kind of don't have resources to either deal with this customer. So what is the, again, rule of thumb? Is it like 10% of your investment or profit, so should go on advertising? Or
so I think if you're a profitable business, 15% of that should go back in to like feed the engine. But that, it totally depends. Like if I can acquire customers and I can make money from every single one of them, then why wouldn't I spend absolutely as much as I can, as long as I don't break the customer service department, for example. So if I can, why wouldn't I? And I can basically, customers pay me money. It cost me £100 to acquire a customer, and within 2 days I've made like £200. Then I'll take that. I'll just keep pulling it through, because it will just grow. I mean, why would you not do that? At some point, something else is going to break, and you're going to go, okay, stop, people. And we need to go and fix this thing. So it's never that easy. There's only very few products where you can just do that all the time, or that there's a channel that constantly just works as you keep growing. Like it won't. There's channels which at some point it will change, and you'll be like, actually, I'm having to spend more and more now to get customers, and so maybe this is this channel itself. I need to start thinking about the next channel in order to acquire customers.
how does it work with Forward Partners? What's the innovation process? How do you help startups from the day they come to the final moment when they grow and go to the Series A?
You need to have a lot of ideas and cull them very quickly before in order to decide which ones to put more money into, right? So we get 4,000 applications a year. Those ideas are generated by lots of individuals out there in the world. Of those, we pick 12 every year. 6 of those pre-seed. Of those 6 pre-seed in a year, we will spend sort of 2 months doing customer research, building prototypes, testing and getting feedback to really understand what the need is. Then we'll spend, some of the companies will not make it past that point because we didn't even see a problem here, or the founder is actually not as capable as we thought. Sometimes that happens, like that, you know, and that's where you're actually going, they seemed credible, we take the risk, let's see what happens. Then you've got a period where you're going to build the product and your MVP, and you know, try to prove that actually will customers buy this product, and that can be between 6 weeks and 4 months of building something. And then, you know, at that point you have to feel confident that I can start to grow this business to the point which you know, within sort of 12 to 14 months it's actually starting to grow such that I can go and raise more money. So if you think about that as an innovation process, there's lots of ideas generated, culling a lot of them to the few that you want to try, and then even then there's gates to first doing lots of understand your customers really well, thinking lean about what is the product that I can build that will allow me to see the value without any of the fluff around it. After that, then start to iterate and hone your experience so that you can start to, you know, increase the conversion rate and start to grow. So,
right, and that's 1 year process.
Yeah.
Let's talk about some mistakes that startup founders make in their first year or in their first couple of years, because you see so many.
Yeah. They don't talk to customers. They don't want to understand the real behavior of their customers. They just have an idea in their head and they just want to build it and get it out into the world, and they're completely blind to going, well, how do I understand the people that I'm trying to serve? Like, that's the number one mistake. Not hiring well and early enough, and understanding, like, in order for this to succeed you have to go from the person doing everything to like transitioning to, I need to build a team around me.
How do you find these people? What kind of people do you hire first? What kind of, is it sales team that you hire first? Is it the operations people?
We've had founders who have hired some amazing like graduates as interns who've actually, you know, super talented, there's no previous history, but they've just, you know, got the energy to run with the business, and they've just grown and grown and grown. Some of them will stay and leave after 6 months. I think that it's good to every year try to bring someone though that is like, especially if you're trying to raise money, who will make you as a founding team look more credible, and have the experience that you don't have. So Patch, for example, after about 6-7 months they started to grow. They hired a sort of COO who had worked at Food Panda, who basically managed delivery and logistics, which was a crucial part of like delivering plants. And so, you know, when he went out to raise money from the next investors, that team looked credible.
I see from the raising money point of view that it's a good decision, but isn't it a bit too early when you're only 6 months in? You kind of figure out yourself what your startup will be like. Hiring someone that senior, isn't it a bit too early?
Actually, for a startup, good to get people that feel like they've still got a lot to prove. So you're not getting them when they have like, look, I've done this 5 times. It's more like, you know, I'm not a newbie to this. I've worked in this space before. I've got a skill set that you don't have, but there's a lot of potential for me to get going. Because yeah, generally you won't have like the money to spend on someone who's like, I've done this 5 times before. You got to identify for yourself what is the thing that I'm not good at that this business needs, and make sure that that is covered, right? So you're building a tech business but you don't have a technical lead in your business. You need to get that, because that otherwise how is it going to continue? Someone that's passionate about because they probably know that I'm not going to earn the most right now, but I'm passionate about what you're trying to do, and that is going to carry them in a long way. and someone that you feel like you can get on with. Doesn't mean necessarily they're exactly like you, but someone that you feel like you can work with, because in the beginning it's so intense and you're working together a long time, so you've got to feel like, you know, we're going to get on and it's going to work. As you grow, that can change a little bit, and you know, you get to a certain point, maybe at about 10 people, where you're going to go, okay, I'm going to start to really grow. And then, you know, then it's really important to think about your culture and your values and what they are, so you can start to hire in for that.
How long shall you give a person before you know that it's not working? What maybe mistakes you can fire for? In
general, you know, within like the first couple of months, you know if they're great or not. And the worst is when you don't. And then they just continue.
Yeah. And with the senior people especially, their impact is not as straightforward. So for example, talking about a COO, it's not like tomorrow suddenly you'll make lots of money because you hired a really experienced COO. Are there any particular things you will be looking at or metrics for someone that's senior?
So I mean, you know, you can give the title of CEO to anyone, right? Like anyone can start a company. Yeah. So it might be a COO as a title, like, but they're still in the beginning anyway going to be very hands-on. But it's more like, wow, here's a whole set of stuff that I was just managing and I didn't really know what I was doing, that I can now to give someone and go, you know what, I'll take that, don't worry about it. And that's the feeling, I think. That's the metric, is like that part of what I was doing, someone else is now running, and then you've got metrics for your business and you'll be able to say, are we hitting them or not? But it's more, I think, the mental side of, there's a piece now that I don't have to be thinking about. What
types of salaries that we are talking about hiring someone senior for a startup? Because you can never afford to give them the salary they had at their previous job, but at the same time you don't want to sound disrespectful offering something that is very low. So where is the balance? Maybe you can give some numbers.
Let's say someone out in the market was like working at a Series B company earning £120,000 and they're going to go and join a seed stage company. It's like, well, you know, maybe they need to be on 80 or 90 max, but there'll be some equation of, well, look, I need equity. There's going to be an equity occasion as well. Like, well, okay, we can offer you, I don't know, 1% of the business. And there might be, if you can, flex it, and you might say, well, I can offer you less salary and a little bit more equity, or you can take a little bit more salary and a little bit less equity, because people have got their own life behind them, right? Of like, well, I've got a mortgage to pay or whatever. And some people are like, actually, what I want is the most equity possible, and I'm happy to take less salary. You say, here's an allocation of equity to you, which is like stock options, and you earn that over time. So if it doesn't work out, then it's not like I've given away this to that person. And generally that's over like a 4-year period. And for the first year there'll be a cliff. So if you don't make it past the first year, you get nothing. After that it's like monthly. Companies, some companies in the valley actually ramp it up over the 4 years, so it starts off less in the beginning and gets progressively more. So it's designed to basically say, look, the longer you stay with us, if you're great, then you'll get more of it. Especially with very senior people, you know, often it's they'll tell you the one thing that will just save you a lot of money. So like, is it worth paying for that bit of time? Yes.
Does Forward Partners accept application companies from abroad, especially if they cannot be fully present all the time in the UK?
Yeah, so the majority of our investments at the moment, because the whole team are working together with the founder, it doesn't make sense to invest in a founder that is not able to sit with us for the whole period. So all of our pre-seed investments are basically working together in the office. Seed companies, we primarily invest in the UK, and then mainly because we're still heavily involved, and it's very difficult for us if we have to keep flying all the time. Yeah. That means, you know, that it's not very efficient for an hour meeting or 2 hour meeting that we have to keep flying abroad. Yeah. So it makes sense to have everyone close by, because that way we feel like we can have a meaningful, you know, give meaningful help. But we have some companies in Germany and etc. that we invest in.
If there is someone watching us right now who got a really good idea, or they think it's really good, and they feel like that will be a brilliant startup, what is the next thing they should do in the next 6 months? to make it happen?
Okay. So the things that we recommend is one, fill out a lean canvas, just to be able to articulate all your idea and all the different facets of a startup. And then the next thing I'd say is like go and find 30 people and see if they've already experienced that problem and just ask them about their experience.
And I have very last question to you, which is quite philosophical. If you could change one thing in the world, you personally, what would it be?
Climate change, because the world's gonna die.
No, I agree. I mean, yeah, I think it's good to see that you working in tech, you still think about the outside world.
Totally, yeah, totally.
Not tech. Brilliant, love it. Thank you so much.
Pleasure.
It was such a pleasure talking to you, and I personally learned a lot. I think I was just asking my personal questions and I got answers, so I'm really happy. I'm looking forward to having you as part of our Design Thinking and Innovation Week in March. So everyone who is watching us and will be lucky enough to join us 18th to 22nd of March will hear more about how to grow your company, how to make sure that your startup does not fail in the first year, how to get investors and all those sorts of things. Press subscribe below this video because we will be releasing more amazing interviews with incredible people. I hope to see you all in London and thank you very much.
Pleasure.